And God said, "Let there be Hemant," and there was Hemant. And on the first day, Hemant created an eBay auction, and it was good. And on the second day, Hemant created a book, and it was good. And on the third day, Hemant created a podcast with a co-host formed from his own rib, and it was good. And on the fourth day, Hemant created a YouTube channel, and it was less good because it talks about God being a murdering asshole. And on the fifth day, Hemant created a blog on Patheos, and it was good, but it made pastors mad. And on the sixth day, Hemant created a community. On the seventh day, he couldn't rest because dude has content to create. Welcome to the Zachrilege cast, Hemant Mehta.
Hey, thank you. That was a cool intro. I like that.
And, with the guests that are on the show that we know don't always take themselves too seriously, I thought I'd throw in a couple of out of context quotes from, your various content.
Oh,
so the first one is, "We want to borrow your male guest for the sex."
I don't even remember which video that's from, but yeah, that's from one of the Bible studies. Or maybe God killing everybody. Who knows?
Yeah, that's I believe that was the one. And you're not ready for this one, but let's do it anyway, which is kind of the theme of this show. So we have to go kind of back to the beginning. So what was the genesis? And I used that on purpose, Pendants, of the Friendly Atheist.
At the time the website started, there were some atheist blogs, not a ton, but I remember that one of the things I was discussing with a lot of other atheists, especially ones who worked in like national groups, is that anytime the media talked about atheism or atheists, like they never just said the word. It was always preceded by some nasty adjective. So it was always, aggressive atheist, militant atheist, staunch atheist, and they were never good words. And because of that eBay thing you mentioned, I was doing some media stuff, and it's like, well, I want to send them to a website. You know what? I'm going to make them say something nice. And Friendly Atheist was available, so I'm like, all right, I'll take that. And it's one of those decisions that I think a lot of internet people have, where I did something when I was younger, and now I'm stuck with it for life. So it's not so much that I'm nice and everyone else is not or anything. It's like, I just want to make you say Friendly Atheist together in the same sentence.
Well, I mean, even on your podcast or, when you're being interviewed by the people, you don't say like, you're not always friendly, but it's not a bad moniker to have.
It's not. It maybe makes it easier for people to slide into the stuff. So that's nice. Again, I would argue I'm not usually nice, especially if I'm critical of something. But again, it's one of those, I think a lot of people who have been blogging or just been online as long as we have, like you end up with something you started a long time ago. And it's like, well, now it's my thing, I guess. I can't like just ditch it. Everyone knows that phrase. So I don't know. I don't know if I was starting from scratch today, it's not what I would choose. I don't know what I would choose, but that probably wouldn't be it.
The nice, but sometimes critical.
Exactly.
You could have like a little like legalese. I did want to tell the people in the show. So you're in Illinois, so it's a beer from Michigan, which is kind of close. Dragon's Milk Reserve. So Dragon's Milk is a bourbon barrel aged stout, and like 2 or 3 times a year they do a reserve version, and this is a version with peanut butter and coconut. So it's basically a peanut butter cup beer.
I can't decide if that would taste good or horrible. How is it?
I'm gonna say it tastes great, but
all right.
Sometimes the sweet and beer don't always work together. But speaking of being pedantic, why can't you sell your soul on eBay?
You know what? So when I did the auction, I basically said, I'm an atheist. I'll go to whatever church you want me to go to. And that got morphed into I'm selling my soul. What I heard from somebody, because they did not remove that auction, what I heard from somebody is, had I actually been trying to sell my soul, they would have said you're selling a body part, and they would not have allowed that. So I'm lucky I wasn't actually trying to do that. But I lucked out in the sense that it was more hype in the sense of how they talked about that.
And you actually recently retweeted someone who was offering basically $10 to people to buy their souls, and I'm like,
I didn't even read past that.
You said
You're right.
been there, done that, and it was like $10. I mean, sure, I'll buy something fake for $10, but you actually got a lot more than that. So
yeah, it was over 500. It was donated, but yeah.
How did this auction kind of lead to the book?
What happened is the guy who bought my soul, big giant quote hands, he got a chance to send me to whatever churches he wanted me to go to, and his prize in return was that I would go to these places and I would write about my experiences on his ministry's website. And what was really cool about that, I'd never blogged, I'd never written anything before, but just documenting, I went to this mega church. This is what it was like. This is what I heard. This is how they treated me. The pastor said this and it rubbed me the wrong way for the following reasons. The people who were commenting back were actually, whether they were Christians or not, they actually had a lot of positive things to say about what I was saying. Even if they were Christian, they'd be like, oh God, that rubs me the wrong way too. I'm sorry you went to that church or you had to deal with that. Or there would be people saying, I think you misinterpreted what you were hearing. Let me try to explain it. That's good feedback. And when I was done with all that, I had a chance to write a book where I went to more churches because a publisher said, that sounds fun. So I did that. But one of the things that came of that is I kind of liked writing about my experience and getting that feedback. And so I thought, well, this experiment is over, but I like that idea. I wonder if I can just write about atheism and blog. There were a couple of blogs at the time, I'm sure more than I knew about, but it was a cool way to interact with people. So I just kind of kept it going. My archives are on friendlyatheist.com. Like, you can see the old stuff I wrote. It's crap. It's all horrible. I haven't looked at it in forever. I'm sure it would make me cringe. But the point is, like, it's a lot more personal. It's a lot more, here's what I'm experiencing, or here's a story that I think people would be interested in. But again, it was cool because people would react because there was nowhere else to really talk about this stuff. This is pre-Reddit. This is pre-YouTube going anywhere. So it was a chance to really talk about this stuff with a like-minded community. I hadn't experienced that before, so it was cool. And that's kind of how that's how it began. But
do you still go to church, since it's been a while since the book came out, since that was 2009?
Now, no. I've been to a couple when pastors who think it would be useful for their congregations to have a conversation on stage with an atheist and say, look, as Christians, we should engage with people who disagree with us. You can do it while holding your convictions and talking about stuff. There are a handful of pastors who genuinely want to exhibit that sort of conversation for their congregations and say, look, this is a way to have a conversation. We don't agree on a lot of stuff. We don't agree on important stuff, but we can talk about it. And if I trust those pastors in a sense, and that's not always a given, I've gone to churches in some of those cases where it's like, okay, I would have a conversation with this person because it's not a debate. I've done that. I haven't gone to church outside of that unless it's like for a friend's wedding or something like that.
So you started to do your blog, but of course you can't just blog. You clearly have to start a podcast. So what was like the origin story of the Friendly Atheist podcast, and then getting to meet your co-host, which is also, I believe she's in your area of Chicago, right?
She is. I knew her for a while. Honestly, I feel like it's a blur. I don't remember how it started. I think we were just getting together for drinks or something because we hadn't seen each other for a while. And we just got to talking and we said, let's start something. If you listen to the old podcast, they were mostly a chance to interview people who we thought were interesting and a chance to talk about the stuff. It's at the time I came to podcasting late, just like I came to YouTube late. But there were already people who were doing shows that I liked. And so it's like, well, I don't want to copy them. What else could we do? There really aren't a ton of places where you have interviews as much as as I like, and certainly not like shorter ones. So we started doing that. And at some point we just kind of morphed into, you know what, let's just talk about the news stories that are going on this week. Because honestly, blogging, I'm not talking to anybody. It's just me. That's not fun. So it was cool to be able to talk to someone who is an atheist, but who doesn't follow atheist related news on a day-to-day basis, which I do. And so just kind of talking it out with Jessica, it helps me get a stronger sense of what's going on. It helps to have someone who can ask questions as we're talking about these stories, bring in angles that I haven't thought about. So that's kind of what the podcast is now. It's just talking about what's been going on. But instead of just talking about news stories, which there's a million of those podcasts, and instead of just talking about politics, same deal, like it's mostly news related to religion or how religion impacts feminism and things like that.
And strangely, there's never a lack of that kind of news for sure.
Yeah, no, I've been blogging. I can't remember the last day I did not post something on the site. It's been several years since I've not done anything. Yeah, there's never a lack of content, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. And you recently did an episode that was just you doing an interview, and you were interviewing a couple of authors who had written a book about kind of secular America.
Yeah.
And one of the questions you asked, and I wanted to get your take on like what you thought about, the answer was, is there a way to create a one kind of item voter on the secular side, like the evangelicals do with abortion?
Right.
Like, is that possible to do? And can we, since you have connected with religious people in the past, can we connect with religious people to say, hey, we believe in environmentalism or something like that, where we can actually have something that gets people, excited about politics for
yeah, I thought that was an interesting point that they made, because that's not the answer I would have given, but that's the one they gave. The idea there is you can get a lot of religious conservatives to vote for Republicans in any election by making abortion. Right now, I think that would be kind of the biggest issue that drives them as a whole. In the past, it might have been gay marriage, but yeah, there's always those culture war issues. But abortion for so many conservative religious people, that's like their only issue. If you are anti-abortion and horrible on every other thing they care about, they won't care. They'll vote for you on the basis of abortion. And the question I asked those two authors, both of whom I spoke to, I think were affiliated with Notre Dame. I don't actually know if they're religious or not. I think they both are. But is there anything on the left, especially on the secular left, that's like a single issue vote for atheists? What is the one thing that would get more secular people, more non-religious Americans to vote for, let's say, a Democrat? Because we're not monolithic. It's not that it's not like there are a ton of Republican atheists per se, a small handful, sure. But what is the thing that's driving us? And that could be a wedge issue in the way that abortion is for the right. And I don't know what that is. I thought maybe church-state separation as a whole could be the one thing that unifies most atheists who disagree on everything. And actually, the answer I believe they gave was environmentalism, which is protecting the environment, climate change issues, Green New Deal, things like that, because it's not just atheists who believe, this is the only life that matters, let's protect the earth, but you also loop in a lot of moderate and progressive Catholics and evangelicals who may not like the Republican Party for a number of reasons, but they say God created this earth, we have to protect it, that's our responsibility. That's actually a thing that not only unites a lot of people on the atheist side of things, but it also would bring together a larger coalition of progressive, moderate religious voters as well. So again, I don't know that climate is necessarily the same driving motivation as much as abortion is for the right, but I thought that was an interesting answer.
And by the way, two people in the chat room have said, hail Hemant. So I've never had anybody been hailed before. So
I don't think that's a good thing.
Is bowing required? I don't even know.
Yes.
But speaking of podcasts, like potato chips, you can't have just one. So what led you, I think it was in your book, you mentioned that one of the speakers you had show up, you had like an atheist group, Michael Newdow showed up.
Yeah.
So what led you to decide to do kind of a separate podcast, 4 episodes about the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah. So a couple years ago, I did, what turned out to be a 4-episode podcast on the history of the Pledge of Allegiance, partly because I thought it would be an interesting series where let's go dig deep into the history of these Supreme Court cases that are influential for church-state separation issues. Because I feel like when it comes to the Pledge of Allegiance, there's a couple of stories, a couple of court cases we always talk about, but there's no real backstory to it. And I hadn't heard anyone do it. So it seemed like an interesting way to spend some time. I don't really know how many people ended up listening to it. So I don't know if I would do it again, but I kind of just threw that one on the wall. Let's see if it sticks. I found it interesting. I thought it was worth my time to research it. And if anyone else found it valuable, great. That's kind of how I do a bunch of projects. Like, I won't get bored finishing this, so let me do it. I'll put it out there, and if anyone wants to listen or if they like it, great. So, but that one was just
a story. Not a lot of people know about the history and the fact that like religious people were involved in protesting the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, like Jehovah's Witnesses are the heroes of that story.
Yeah, the Pledge of Allegiance has evolved over time.
Yeah, many times over. So it was a cool experiment. It was a cool thing to do. It's one of those things that I didn't know if it would turn into anything or not. I think at this point the answer is probably no. Like, I just did that thing and now I'm done with that project. I'll move on to something else. I've done a lot of stuff like that where it's like, it seemed like a good idea. I did it. Now I'm done. Let's move on. But it was a fun project and I learned a lot. So.
Well, so learning and moving forward, and you always get little details that kind of help you in the future.
Yeah.
So before we get to yet another one of your content streams, let's do our weekly deep dive into our fractured atheist community. I feel like it's one of those take a drink things.
Uh-huh.
So on your Patheos blog, you talked about the right-wing atheist faction at CPAC. So what made you decide you wanted to get into that? And you got into a little bit of a Twitter battle too. So.
Oh yeah, that's typical. Here's the issue I have. Like, there are conservative atheists, and I don't think that's weird necessarily, because again, atheists are united by what? One answer to one question about God. After that, we're all over the place on a lot of other issues. There's overlap on a lot of liberal issues, I would say. So, I mean, one, the idea of atheists who would support the current version of the Republican Party strikes me as weird, because every time I'm looking at today's Republican Party, it's pretty much a religious right party. They're controlled by evangelical, conservative religious people, at least in terms of the policies they talk about, what they promote, all things like that. So again, the question is, why would anyone support the Republican Party? Why would atheists who are actively engaged on the atheism issue, and who presumably care about church-state separation and rational thinking, quote unquote, like, why would they support the Republican Party? So that's part of it. Part of it is like, okay, it's weird that they're Republican. But then to go even further than that and say, it's not just they're Republican on like tax issues, but like, no, they're all in with Trump stuff, or they're all in with that stuff. That goes, I don't understand how you square the lies that the Republican Party promotes with any version of, I'm an atheist because I want to believe more true things than false things. That doesn't make any sense to me. So the idea that there's a group, but it's more like a handful of people who literally bought a booth at CPAC because they want to go there. I think if I'm putting it in the best possible light, they say, we know there are a lot of religious people here, but that's where you got to go. If you're an activist, you want to go where you can influence people, not be in an echo chamber. But again, I think my response to that is, I don't think you're doing any favors by winning over the sort of people who go to CPAC. Like, what do you gain if they say, all right, I want to join your group? You get Trump crazy people who are atheists. Like, I don't know what you win in that regard. I don't know how that squares with the whole let's support science education and church-state separation and all this stuff that the party opposes, I don't know why you would want to join that. I would actually understand if they said, there are some issues that we think Democrats go too far to the left on. We are conservative. We're more libertarian than anything else. But that's not what they're doing. They're saying, nope, CPAC, that's where we belong. That's where the normal, rational people are on these issues. That makes absolutely no sense if you listen to the speeches that were on stage, if you see the people they invite as their keynote speakers. It doesn't make sense to me. And by the same logic, there are anti-abortion atheists. I actually understand where they're coming from. But again, when it comes down to it, supporting a Republican Party that opposes the science on these things, that makes it harder for people to make their own decisions, that's where I don't get where they're coming from anymore. It's like having an atheist group. I haven't seen this, but hypothetically, it'd be like an atheist group that says we oppose marriage equality. It's on what basis? It's not your religion. And if it's not that,
if you say it, it clearly exists out there. I was just thinking of, American atheists and David Silverman back in the day, 2014, let's say before we even thought Trump was going to be a thing.
Yeah.
At the CPAC is oh, atheists going to CPAC, cool. And then 6 years later, you're oh, the same guy, but now he's on the side of CPAC. When they went in 2014 or whatever, keep in mind, they're representing American atheists, not just Silverman's personal views or anything. And they literally said our purpose in going there is, I hope I'm not misquoting them. I think they said it's kind of like purchasing a booth at a flat earth convention. And they said, we're going there to inject reason into an unreasonable space. I think I heard either them or someone use that metaphor or that analogy. And I was but if you go to a flat earth conference, you're going there to tell everybody they're wrong, and you're trying to get them to see your perspective. When American atheists went to CPAC in 2014, I genuinely thought that's what they were trying to do. To say, look, we're atheists. We want you to hear our perspective on this. And also, we want to tell you you're wrong on all this stuff. And again, I think there were a lot of moderating forces within American atheists, so that it really did come off that way. Whether or not they were successful is another issue. I think one year they actually had one of their members on stage making a short speech. When they go this time, they're not on stage. They're honestly going there celebrating the people at CPAC. They're doing interviews with the right-wing crowd. They are not injecting reason into that space because they're part of the people who are unreasonable. So I don't think it's the same version of Silverman. I don't think it's the same. They're not going with the same goal in mind that the group did several years ago. And I think calling them out on if you're trying to look for reason, there are conservative spaces you could go to where that might make sense. CPAC is not one of them. Yeah, it's a hard argument to make at this point after you hear all the even snippets of speeches from there.
Here's an example of what I really didn't get. This is one of the things that they literally tweeted. The group Atheists for Liberty tweeted. They said if you look at the issues that matter to CPAC voters, because they did a straw poll, number one was I don't know if I'm quoting this correctly, but election fraud. Or protecting our elections or something like that. Okay. There was no election fraud. Number two was protecting constitutional rights, as if someone is going to repeal the Second Amendment or take away the First Amendment or cancel culture or whatever it is. Those are both irrational takes on both of those issues. And the reason they tweeted that is they said pro-life issues, the religious issue, was last on the list in terms of the things they showed on that slide. And their point in celebrating that was saying, look, the religious issue is low on that list. We are helping them become less religious here, which, first of all, buddy, don't give yourself credit for that. But two, we don't win when they are replacing religious irrationality with secular irrationality. That's not a win for our side when they're saying stupid, evidence-free things, but they don't mention God in the sentence. I don't see that as a win. That's just a different form of crazy. Why are we celebrating that? So again, that was the thing they tweeted that you mentioned a Twitter battle. That's the one thing we had a Twitter war about. Because like
It wasn't much of a battle.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a one-sided.
And anytime a group puts the name Liberty in there, it automatically. I mean, we have Liberty University, which is like one of the most theocratic institutions in our country, and
it's like a Christian group
that's keeping you busy by itself. Like
it's like a Christian group using the word family. Anytime they use it, you know it's going to be anti-gay. They don't care about same-sex couples in their families. Like, it's code. So I don't know. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one right there. So when you use, the Friendly Atheist brand, clearly we're talking quality. So you had to take this over to YouTube, and now you have a space in your basement which has a nice red wall, which is a nice. Yeah. It really works. So what was the idea behind? You did a video lately that I think you thought was going to be maybe a relatively short thing, and it turned out to be not so, about how many people God kills in the Bible. So what made you think, hey, let me do this, and what did it end up becoming? And I'm getting another beer, so you can feel free to talk.
Sure. The thought is, I've seen memes that say how many people did God kill in the Bible, and it's a huge number. And there's the same meme will say like Satan only killed 10 people, but it's an image. And so I've seen it on Reddit, I've seen it elsewhere, but that's kind of it. I wondered, I know the place they got that information from, this guy named Steve Wells, who wrote the Skeptic's Annotated Bible, which, by the way, if you haven't seen that, go Google Skeptic's Annotated Bible. It's just an incredible resource for atheists going through the Bible or something. It's fantastic. He does it with the Quran. I think he does it with some other religious book too. But he had gone through and said, let me document all of God's kills in the Bible. And I thought, like, okay, that's where the information is coming from. They're using his estimates, and that's where those memes came from. I wondered if there was any videos that documented it. There was, I think, one that just like listed the numbers and just said, like, in the book of Joshua, chapter whatever, this happens. It's one line with a few words, and it just gives you the number, and then it keeps going. And it's like, I don't know what that means. Like, what's the story there? And I thought it would be more interesting if I could go through and kind of tell those stories in like a minute or two and explain where we're getting all these numbers from. Because Steve didn't pull them out of his ass. He's trying to give a conservative estimate on how many people God killed. And so that was the idea. I'm like, hey, Steve, would you mind if I tried making a video on this? I emailed him like last September, maybe. And he's like, have at it if you want to. He was very kind about letting me go forth and do whatever the hell I wanted to try. And when I started getting into it, it's like, how do you explain Noah's Ark in like a minute? And it's like, I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but I am going to try to tell you where the number came from of how many people we think God killed in there. And just trying to do that with every story, some of which I knew, some of which I'm like, holy crap, I didn't know that story was in the Bible. And then the more I did it, I wrote up a script and I realized, oh no, this is long. I don't know how long this final product is going to be. And then I recorded it and it turned out to be like 2.5 hours. So it's all up there.
I do want to point out, this guy does, he does check his work. So you have verified kills and then like an estimate.
Yeah, if the Bible
says like God killed an entire city,
right?
It doesn't say here's the population of the city, so you have to fill it in. So I thought that was really good, and I'll share like the image you had at the end, because you did the running total, verified kills estimated. I think we ended up just shy of 25 million, which is
that sounds about right. Yeah. And
the New Testament wasn't so bad. The New Testament was like 10.
New Testament only had, I think, 3 stories in it. And again, those are just the ones you attribute to God, not random kills in wars, not people post Jesus. Like it's very much we can attribute either God did it or God was cool with it. It's one or the other. Everyone that's in there. And it turns out he's like the most prolific serial killer in all of fiction.
Well, after, doing this kind of content for, it seems like you've been at it for like 15 years or so.
Yeah.
Do you ever get like, okay, I've had enough of like the Bible or Christianity, or you like, you still have to find new angles to approach it?
I think that's a key point to make. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm always going to try different things. And again, there's stuff I'm better at than others. Like TikTok, I'm not a TikTok person. So that's not for me. But I've seen some atheists doing stuff on there and they're really good at it. And it's like, oh, cool. I see what they're doing with it. I like that. So I think the question for me is, where can I be useful here? I watch a ton of other creators. I listen to a bunch of other podcasts. And I guess the question I'm always wondering is, okay, what can I do here, but make it something I would listen to or that someone else would find valuable? My website is always about current events. Like, that stuff expires in like 2 minutes, but I'm hoping the YouTube stuff is more, that's going to last a little longer, because how many people did God kill in the Bible? I think that would still be useful a couple years from now. You know what I mean? But the thing I would tell anyone who's trying to start something is, I don't know, what would you want to watch? And like, listen, if YouTube is a new thing, for example, it's not, but like when it was, it's not that it's not that atheism had new arguments. It's that newer people had their own ways of bringing that information using the technology. And it turns out some of them are really good at it. And it's really exciting to see it. I have no idea how old you are. Like, when I was in high school, like, there were a handful of books about atheism that were all very academic and very boring. Yeah. And maybe some AOL chat rooms or something. Like, there weren't a lot of resources for atheists that I knew about as a high schooler. I know there were some magazines out there too. I've heard from people who said they would go to their library and read Skeptical Inquirer or things like that. But there weren't a ton of resources. And the fact is, like, now there are a lot of resources, but you know what? 10 years from now, no one's going to be using blogs. No one's using YouTube. We're going to have to adapt what we do to whatever the new technology is. I heard someone make a joke once, like, when it comes to new technology, there are two groups of people that always seem to capitalize on it and rework what they do to make it work. And that is evangelical pastors and people who make porn. And it's the only thing they have in common, but they always find a way to adapt to new stuff. But it's kind of like, yeah, they know how to do it. They know how to make it work in these new forms. So we got to do that. And so that's one thing, like podcasting. It's interesting. I listen to podcasts. What can I do if I'm making one that might be interesting to somebody? And then I try to do that. Same thing with YouTube. Like, what would I want to watch on YouTube? I mean, I have enough of the current event news stuff. So what else could I make that might be interesting like a year from now or 2 years from now? So that's what I've tried to make there. I have no idea what I'm doing like a year from now, but hopefully it'll be adapting as much as necessarily. But yeah, so we'll see. It changes all the time. Like the Bible video I made about God killing people, I don't think I could have made that in a useful way on my blog. I don't think I could have done that in a podcast form in a way that would have been interesting. But being able to show the numbers on screen, being able to tell those stories quickly, telling it in the way I feel comfortable with, that was something I could do on YouTube that was exciting for me. And now I'll do something else. I don't know.
Yeah, you'll do. I feel like you'll find something to do with yourself. So sometimes on these shows, it's hard to get to someone beyond their kind of persona as a content creator. But for you, you were on Jeopardy. I would like to hear, like, is there any story you want to share about your experience? Because you were on Jeopardy and the show just appeared like last April. So
yeah.
And spoiler alert, he won. So tell us about being on there, and Have you studied Canadian geography since?
I've been auditioning forever, and usually the way it works is you take an online test. At the time, there were certain dates you had to take it. Now I think it's any time. I've taken it, and then they never get back to me, which either means I failed the test or I did okay and they just didn't contact me. So I assumed that's what was going to happen. But whatever, last year, a couple years ago, I took it. They emailed me and said, we want to meet you in person, which is like the next step. And my thinking was always, just get me in the door. I will try to win you over. Just get me in that door and like give me that chance. You know what I mean? And so they said, long story short, they said, we're coming to Chicago on this date. And I thought to myself, shit, I'm going to be out of town that day. It's already planned. I booked the ticket and everything. I'm not going to be there. And they said, if you can't make it, let us know. I did. And I'm like, look, if you are anywhere else, I will drive there on any other date. And they said, we're going to be in Milwaukee later in the year. Can we email you when we are there? And I'm like, yes, sure. And I didn't think I would hear from them again. They did write back and they said, we're going to be in Milwaukee on this date. I think it was Thanksgiving of a couple of years ago, that weekend or something. And I'm like, fine, I will drive up there. Not a problem. I'll be there. And so I drove there. It was, without getting too many details here, you have to take another test in person so they know you didn't cheat online. You play a mock game. They just want to talk to you for a couple minutes because like you are in a room full of people who are pretty good at trivia. They just want to know if you're I think the way they put it is, we just want to know if you're someone the audience on TV could root for, because you can kind of tell if you're watching somebody and they seem really unlikable. You know what I mean? And so you played a practice game. They even told us, like, we don't care if you get it right. We already know you can get stuff right. We want to know what you look like if you don't get it right. We want to know what you look like when you answer the questions. You look like you belong there. And then they have a short conversation with you. And then they say, all right, bye. Maybe we'll call you. We probably won't, but maybe we'll call you. And to my shock, they called one day and they said, you're going to be on the show. This is the day. Either come there or you're not going to be on the show. I'm like, all right, I'm canceling everything I do. I booked my ticket. I have to pay my own way there. I pay for the hotel. But if you lose on the show, you get $1,000. So it's like, all right, it balances out. So I spent 6 weeks last winter just cramming like crazy in all my free time. And the weird thing about that show is like, you don't know what they're going to ask. So it's like, well, what do you study? I think I memorized every world capital because that's pretty useful no matter how they ask questions. I think I've tried to memorize every synopsis of every Shakespeare play and some other small stuff here and there. And yeah, it was cool because one, Alex Trebek was still there. We knew his health wasn't good, but we felt lucky that we were there when he was.
So when did you record the show?
End of January last year.
Okay.
I think by April or May, I can't remember the timeline there, but we recorded at the end of January. The show aired in April. But what was really neat about it is I thought going in, there's a couple of things that could happen. One is, what if the returning champion is like a superstar and we have no idea that we're all lambs to the slaughter here? That like, hello, your returning champion is this 97 game champion who's going to slaughter you. And like, that could very well happen. We had no idea. And also what was neat about it is I think I was in a room, they tape a week of shows in one day. I was there with like 12 other people who all went through that same journey I just did in terms of trying to get on, getting lucky enough to get called to be on. We're all living out our dream for a day and maybe longer, who knows? And like, most of us are going to go home very unhappy. You know what I mean? We're all there and it's like, I kind of want to hate everybody because it'll make it easier to try to beat them. And I didn't. They were all really nice. Like they were all sweet. They were all so different and interesting. And it's like, I'm sitting in the audience for the games that I wasn't playing and you're genuinely rooting for these other people who you have to beat. It was such a cool experience. So I don't know. It was cool. We didn't get to meet Alex other than what you see on the show. So I literally had my 5 seconds with him on stage, where he chats with you during the audience, during the contestant interview. That's kind of it. You don't really get to talk to him because of the rules. And so it was an awesome experience. Even if I lost, I would be telling you it was an awesome experience. And I got to meet some really amazing people.
But if you ever get to do karaoke, and I know Ethan asked you about karaoke and you said you were not much of a karaokeer.
Yeah, not even.
You would definitely do the Weird Al Yankovic song I Lost on Jeopardy because you did.
We all lose. Everyone lost at some point or another. So it's.
Well, I mean, how does it? So when you win, do you get to do another show after that?
Yeah, I think what happened is they taped 3 shows in the morning. They did a lunch break and then they taped 2 more shows. I was in show number 3. I happened to win. And then there was an hour lunch break where they said, stick around because you're going to be in show number 4. So I'm going to lunch with all these other contestants who have not played yet, all of whom now want to beat me, which is a weird position to be in, but they were all super sweet. But we all went to lunch together as contestants, talked about non-Jeopardy related things because they were awesome. And then, we just brushed our teeth, changed clothes, and that was it. You're right back in the saddle and you do it again. They literally said, bring a change of clothes. And they did not like my first option. They said, bring like 3 pairs of clothes. Oh. Whatever I thought would be my number one thing to wear, they said, you can't wear that. It looks bad on camera. Go change. So I did that. And then because I won, I'm like, oh shit, I'm down to pair of clothes number 3, which I didn't think I would need. And I wasn't happy with how it looked. And so it's like, oh no, all right, I guess I'll wear this crap. It's all I have left. I didn't think I would be here this long. So.
And how was it for you when Al Scherbeck died? Was it like you're glad that you had that opportunity to even very briefly get to interact?
That's exactly what it was. Like I knew it was going to happen at some point. I won't pretend that I know the guy any better than a stranger. Like, and I doubt, he goes through so many contestants all the time. Like I'm a nobody. So let's be clear about that. But yeah, I think I just felt I got very lucky because I didn't know when we taped the show, honestly, if he would be there, because we taped it well after he had gone public about his cancer diagnosis and all that. So honestly, we had no idea if he would be there that day when we taped it. So yeah, I just felt lucky we got to play. I got a picture with him, which is exciting. And yeah, so it was, I'm glad it was a nice thing that happened before the world broke.
Yeah, the world definitely did break. So, you did mention earlier that you were, when you started going to churches, you really weren't much of a writer, and now that's a lot of what your life now is. You were studying to be a teacher. So, what was it like being a teacher, and at what point did you decide, okay, let me do this activism thing full time? And do you miss that at all?
I taught for 7 years at a high school. And I started teaching when I pretty much started blogging too. And so when I started teaching, I think it was 2013 or 2014, where I thought if I had another 10 hours in a day, which is what I'm doing at school, if you gave me 10 more hours to work on the website or create content or do something else, could I make it worthwhile to do it full time? And I thought, you know what, if I think I could make that work, but you know what, I have a year or two where if it doesn't work, I can go back to teaching and it won't be an issue. So I thought it was worth the risk. I didn't have kids at the time, so it was worth it. So I tried it. It worked out. I'm still at that position where I'm like, I made the right move. But it was something I put a lot of thought into. Like I wouldn't change jobs that easily. And I like teaching. I didn't want to give that up unless I thought I could do something even more exciting. And so, I left because I thought I could do this full time. So far that's worked out. And I think if I don't do this, I would find something else to do.
Did you ever have issues with like students or parents of students because you had some notoriety? I mean, you were
Sure.
Kind of had national attention at a pretty young age.
I got very lucky for a couple of things. One is I taught math. That's not a controversial subject, so it doesn't really come up in the classroom as it would like an English classroom or maybe even a science classroom. I never had those issues. And two, if a kid ever asked me about it or a parent did, it was very easy to say, I don't talk about this at school. So just like politely shutting that conversation down. Once I don't think anyone would tell you I talked about this stuff in class. So it's like, all right, what are they going to complain about? If anyone's mad, they're mad about stuff I do in my private life, not what I do in the classroom. So they have nothing to complain about unless it's their math grade, which is a different issue. So it's like I tried to do everything I could to not bring it into the classroom. And usually the kids, again, I guess the notoriety you mentioned is more well known outside Like high schoolers do not care about me. I promise you that. You know what I mean? So like they did not see me as that. I was their math teacher. I was not a dude who was on the internet. So that made it easier too.
So one thing, you mentioned before that you were not like a karaoke person, but what if there was a version of karaoke where you get to do like famous speeches? Because you like to talk.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to do if you had a chance? Would it be like the George Washington farewell speech or something like that?
You know what's weird is I coach public speaking when I was a teacher. I'm still doing that now at the same school. I've been doing that since, like, I think this is year 14 or 15 of coaching. So I work with kids on delivering speeches all the time, but they're not the George Washington ones. They are new ones, like whether it's a TED Talk or a version of that or something like that. So I'm used to thinking in those terms. Like every year there are kids who are delivering speeches that I'm like, they're so good at it. I wish I could do that again. I wish I was young enough to do that again because I competed in it too, but I wasn't as good as they are. So it's like, oh, I enjoy watching more than I enjoy delivering though. Now, I do miss going to different places and giving talks though. I look forward to when we can all travel and get together again. I miss doing that.
Yeah, during the coronavirus time, are you doing like virtual talks or have you just kind of stopped that?
Yeah, I gave some virtual talks and they're always, I mean, the people are always awesome. And if they show up, like they're super receptive and they're awesome with questions, but it's not the same. Like I miss just hanging out with people, doesn't everyone? So I look forward to going back to that a little bit in the near future. But again, I'm not alone on that, so.
Well, I mean, we've talked about your trivia skills. Clearly, everybody would like to have you on their trivia team. Are there any other?
I haven't done pub trivia in a long time.
Well, I mean,
but also I'm not good at pub trivia. When I did that, even with some colleagues at the school, like that is not my forte. The different thing about Jeopardy is the way they write the clues. There's usually like 2 ways to get to the answer. So you could, even if you don't know the answer, you can logic your way into it, maybe. And pub trivia is just like, how many bones are in your body? There's just like a right answer and you know it or you don't. And it's like, oh, I'm not good at that kind of trivia.
Well, is there any, I mean, because what you do for a living is something that could have been done, before Corona during, some people say, wow, your life hasn't changed very much, but has there been like a skill you have gained during this time, or if you just like stay busy?
The YouTube stuff, I actually did more of during coronavirus time, during pandemic time than ever before. Like I've made YouTube videos in the past, but what I did more recently, slowly before coronavirus, but a lot more afterwards, is learning how to edit my own stuff, post my own stuff. Like I do it on my own channel now, and I don't necessarily have help unless I specifically request it on something like I did with the Bible video. So YouTube for me was a big pandemic project. I've been working on a lot more crosswords, like writing them. I got one published last year in the New York Times, which was awesome and exciting. And they've rejected all the other ones since. But I feel like I'm getting closer. So I've been trying to. It takes a while to get used to their mindset of how do you construct it in a way that fulfills all their requirements. And it's so much harder than it looks for anyone who's tried. But like, I feel like I'm cracking it a little. It's
hard.
Yeah. It's hard enough to do it, but writing it is a challenge that is new for me. And it's a way to get my mind off of politics and religion, which is what I'm doing 90% of the day. You know what I mean?
Well, we'll have to get in touch with my wife because she's a big crossword. She likes to do. We used to get the New York Times Sunday paper just for the crossword puzzle, and now she does them all online. But
me too.
It's a certain skill that you have to get a lot of reps to really figure it out. And there's a lot you learned a lot of things from it.
What I specialize as in like what I'm trying to specialize in, but I haven't succeeded yet, is like the Friday, Saturday puzzles where there's no gimmick. It's just hard words and lots of them.
It gets harder as the week goes on. That's what I mean.
And that's the one I got published a year ago, but trying to replicate that in a way that is useful has been really hard. And there are some people, though, who do it all the time, and they're so good at it, and you get to know their names of the constructors, and you're like, oh, it's this person's puzzle. I know it's going to be good because I know how they construct. And trying to get in that mindset has been a cool challenge. If you're asking me what I've been doing with my pandemic time, that's but I feel every time I submit something, I'm like, I know I'm getting closer, even if I'm not quite there yet. So at some point, I feel like they got to say yes at some point. I'll get there.
Clearly. Well, it's been a great time. Before we get to your, letting people know where they can find you, is there anything else you wanted to cover?
I'm thinking. No, if anyone's interested in any of the stuff, the YouTube stuff is always fun. So if you search Friendly Atheist on YouTube, you'll find my stuff. Otherwise, friendlyatheist.com is where you find me. And that's all the day-to-day shenanigans of what's going on.
Oh, they're shenanigans, and it's all good. Hemant Mehta, thank you for being on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
For sure, Zach. Thank you for having me. Thanks for the questions. And I've been looking at the comments slowly throughout stuff. Thank you to the people watching.
Yes, good audience tonight.